Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at Rawhead Rex by Clive Barker. It's a graphic novel illustrated by Steve Niles, or adapted by Steve Niles and illustrated by Les Edwards. There's also a story at the back that is illustrated by a different fellow. His name is Hector Gomez. But really we're here to look at Rawhead Rex. And I thought I'd share a little bit of my Clive Barker collection of things. Obviously Clive Barker has done some media franchises that are pretty popular, chief among those being the Hellraiser. And back in, I guess it says 2011, there was a, it says March 2000. I don't know what's going on there. There was a Hellraiser series. This series is actually really good. I have all the floppies for it. And then this is a cover that I bought at the time that I just haven't opened. I figured I'd hold on to as a bit of a collectible. This is by Nick Percival. He's an awesome artist. He does like some Judge Dredd stuff now. So I have the Hellraiser. I have this book called Next Testament, which this is a really good story. It's probably, so I've read two things this year as far as graphic novels go that I consider just like really good writing. And it'd be this, as well as Something is Killing the Children. It's really fantastic. It's not necessarily the type of art that we were showcasing in the last video with Bernie Wrightson of a traditional artist. This is much more, maybe it's drawn with pencil and ink, but it's much more figure drawing and then letting the colors dictate form as opposed to mark making. And that doesn't personally appeal to me as much, but I still think it's really good art. The figures are really good. There's lots of really challenging drawings in this book. I recently got this, which is Clive Barker's The Great and Secret Show. I didn't even know they had done a graphic novel adaptation of it. So I will be flipping through that at some point. And once I get a little refresher of the story, because I don't know, seeing Clive Barker's bigger novels come to life through illustration is probably going to be quite the experience, because some of that stuff I didn't think was really possible. I also have of course, the hardcover book of The Great and Secret Show, which has a pretty neat cover. This actually is raised and textured. And then this book, which is, I have quite a bit more Clive Barker stuff, but this is the first thing I really read in my life that was not like a kid's book. I read it when I was 10, maybe a little too young, I don't know. My dad gave it to me, and it really stuck with me because Clive Barker did these illustrations, and I don't know, I've just always thought about this book and thought about how it sort of jump-started a more interested mind in terms of horror and dark fantasy. And these illustrations captured me. I bring that up because I wrote my own book when I got out of college, and I didn't seek to do too much with it. I was pretty happy just to write it. And now that I can draw, I thought maybe I should do an illustration sort of book, kind of like Clive Barker did there. And so I have started those. And if you watched my last video, then you can always just skip ahead to where we get to Rawhead Rex if that's what you're here for. But here my illustrations are a little different than Clive Barker's. I mean, this is supposed to be a kid's book. Clive Barker's, mine is very much not. So, maybe there's a little bit different level of what we're going after here. But I just thought the illustrated novel is a cool concept that's not utilized. And I don't know how much this is showing up on the camera since I have to get the camera pretty low, but this is my chapter 2 image. I'm going to have this 10 chapter book. I'm going to have one image per chapter. So this is chapter 2, and it needed to be a pretty early introduction to our main character here. And this is him sort of living out a fantasy in his head. This is not a real event. This is imagined in his head of him taking retribution against someone at his workplace that has belittled him and wronged him. I think a lot of people can relate to the power fantasy of letting people know you're not to be run over. And so I thought I should really capture that. And it's been really hard to capture one image per thousands of words trying to illustrate what an entire chapter is about. And I need these images to tell a cohesive story in their own way. So it's been hard, it's been fun, it's challenged me to not only try and find ways to introduce characters, but compose scenes. So that's my first image that I did. And then this is my chapter 3 image, which again, I don't know exactly where the camera's picking it up at, what you can see. But I almost did sort of a sequential art thing here. In the book, the character, as lame as it sounds, really is, or the city really is a character. And I know that's a bit cliched, but the book can only really happen in a post-industrial sort of wasteland where industry has gone too far and it sort of weighs heavy on the inhabitants of this world. And anyway, so they go out in this chapter, him and his girlfriend, to visit the ruined cityscape. And I didn't want to fully draw his partner because I thought it'd be more interesting to sort of just imply what she looked like, and maybe that'll be a motif I keep through the whole thing. In the book, it's always sort of implied that she is maybe way out of his league. So that's I think maybe keeping her silhouetted a lot of the times. But that's the vision there for chapter 3, because I wanted to introduce the city, and then one of the other main characters. And then my current one I'm working on, this is probably way too big. I decided to do like a double page spread. And I kind of wanted to do, for lack of a better term, a sort of Renaissance-esque piece inside a factory. I still have to design a bunch of equipment and machinery here, which is proving really hard. But I figured I say Renaissance because Renaissance paintings sometimes had a heavy emphasis on lots of figures doing their own thing. And so I did want to try that task of having lots of figures through the image, and there'll be more over here. But still having the attention be on our main character as he's sort of being, once again, bullied in a way at his workplace. So this is not something I've done yet, but in my art journey is drawing similar faces. So trying to make them, this is our character. It's been pretty fun and challenging. So anyways, hopefully the next time I make a video, I will have this done. But let's get on to the book here. Sorry for taking so long there, kind of shilling my own things and what I'm doing. But here's Rawhead Rex. So Rawhead Rex was a short story that first appeared in Clive Barker's Books of Blood. That's something I also have. The Books of Blood is sort of the seminal work that got Clive Barker showcased and known. It's a collection of short stories that are all really good. Rawhead Rex, I still think that In the Hills, the Cities, is probably the more well-known story, or maybe better, quote unquote. But I'd say Rawhead Rex is like maybe the other top story. And they pretty much use exactly the language that is in the book here. Of all the conquering armies that had tramped the streets of Zeal down the centuries, it was finally the mild tread of Sunday Tripper that brought the village to its knees. And so, yeah, it's just like a little countryside village. Probably makes more sense if you're actually from the UK or something in terms of the layout of the countryside. But, it starts by showing some of this. Oh, and I want to say, one of the reasons I'm showing this is because this is an oil-painted comic book, which I think is so cool. I mean, these are each panels, just oil-painted. I don't know. Les Edwards did a really good job. His first, I think this is his second graphic novel, Rawhead Rex. The first being Son of Celluloid, which I think there's kind of a marked improvement in Rawhead Rex, just in the painting and illustration power. I mean, these are really good when I look at them, and maybe it had something to do with the way they're scanned in and whatnot, or the paper. I feel like this is a little looser, which is fine, but this book has some really strong detail work. And so anyways, let's get into our story here. It begins with a farmer kind of trying to dig out a rock, which is sort of funny. I've heard people talk about farming and rocks and how somehow rocks always show up that you have to remove. And of course, this rock is pretty much a tomb, I believe, if I recall correctly. Something entrapping or burying something old from the earth. So working at it, boom, something grabs his shovel. And yeah, I just think these are really good oil paintings. I don't have too much to comment on in terms of, I'm not an oil painter. I do kind of see this background here. It makes me wonder if he used an actual wood board to paint on, and this is the scan-in of that. I just don't know. That could very well be the thing, or it could not be. It could just be a choice. But here we get our big reveal of the monster. And super cool. If you've read the book, then you know this is sort of like many of Barker's things, somewhat sexual, somewhat twisted and dark, and maybe this story has a little bit to do with almost like toxic masculinity or patriarchy and feminism in a way. So there's Rawhead Rex, first kill down, the farmer. And then he goes on the run, and I believe he hides in a barn. There goes the horse. There's a movie about Rawhead Rex, which I have watched a little bit of. I personally couldn't finish it. I do not think the monster design in it is very good. I mean, it's nothing like what Barker describes in the book. This is a very strong adaptation visually of that. And I won't get too much into the obvious reasons why, but you can imagine a sort of Geiger-esque psychosexual story and what that sort of looks like there. Story is also pretty much just a rampage of killing with nice words, of course, plucked from Barker's short story. And there's a little bit of a religious component, and then of course, so cop finds dead bodies, and then on their way back, the cops are actually confronted by Rawhead Rex. This is a great shot right here. It's maybe kind of hard to see, but I don't know. Painting that seems like it'd be really tough. Painting all this seems like it'd be really tough. And some of it is a little looser. On the more sequential art, definitely a little looser and more gestural. But he still nails it. You still know exactly what you're looking at. What I will say, compared to, say, a Bernie Wrightson, is that following the panels was much more challenging at times. I think that there's a little bit of lack of experience in that regard. And I always kind of struggle with comic books sometimes when panel layouts get wild. This is all pretty clear. Anyways, religious dude decides to bend the knee basically to Rawhead Rex, and yeah, you can see what's happening there. Pretty Clive Barker-esque in that regard. But all in all, like captivating images from Les Edwards. I really like how he flared the gums back here. He leans a little into cartoon in a way, which I like. I think that's kind of the fun of drawing. I used to think realism was like the ultimate peak, being able to make something look like it does in real life. But I now am of the opinion that's almost the most boring facet of drawing, realism or photorealism. I think once you start bending reality to your own vision, that becomes far more interesting. And that's what I want to see from people, is how they view things. So still the church stuff. Guy who bent the knee is kind of being weird and, trying to say like, we should serve him and stuff like that. Great shot here. Another great one. Like I said, I just love the art in this. And I don't know how often we'll get oil painted books or places that care enough to give someone time enough to do that anymore. A little bit of calm between the storms here, but it doesn't last for long because now we get a nice big page of Rawhead Rex getting a boy, which I thought was kind of hardcore. You don't usually see a whole lot of young people being injured and things. And so for that family to witness that, I thought was pretty intense. And just sort of some of the storytelling that, you know, I think people shy away from, even though it's a reality. Great image. I even like the attention put into like the shoes. And of course, I guess feasting on a length of intestine there. Like I said, this dude is no good. The guy who bent the knee, he's just become a devout zealot for it and basically trying to get this other guy found and known. I look at these pages and Les Edwards still has some of the original art, and I hesitate to say that because I want to buy some of it someday. But, you know, if you get the money, gosh, I think it'd be so cool to own some of these pages. So he's kind of like burned up and blistered here, and you can even see in the painting the blisters on his skull or his head. Anyways, townspeople overcome, and then they kind of start a mosh and take him down, bashing him with rocks. And so yeah, there's the final splash page. Really good image. And then, you know, the boards say, it was over suddenly, without ceremony or celebration. The king went out, once and for all. There was no cry. Ron left the stone where it lay, half buried in the face of the beast. It went unnoticed, but in death, Rawhead's bladder was empty. A stream of urine pulsed from the steam from the corpse and ran down the road. The rivulet steamed in the chilling air, its scummy nose sniffing left and right as it looked for a place to drain. After a few feet, it found the gutter and ran along it a while to a crack in the tarmac. There it drained off into the welcoming earth. The end. I mean, he even captured that in the painting. But like I said, this book, I think it elevates things quite a bit to have the actual words of Clive Barker, whose prose is very beautiful, even though he might write about some dark, foul things. And there's sort of a contradiction there. But I don't know. You're never going to catch too much criticism from me in regards to comics because this medium is so cool and so underutilized and so misrepresented in a way. If you have oil paintings, they're held in high regard. If you have novels, they're held in super high regard. But it's like when you combine the two, paintings or drawings and words, somehow in people's minds it's less. And I think that's such a shame that people think that way or that these things are for children. So I'm never going to criticize it too much. I'm not really going to go over this story because I actually didn't enjoy it all that much. It was pretty slow, very verbose and wordy. Maybe it just had to do with when I read it, but yeah, you can just see the amount of script on the page. It was a lot. And I think if we're talking about this respecting comic books and their level of respect and how it's lost somewhere between words and images, even though both aside are viewed highly. I still think that it's a really hard balance to get words and pictures working together, but I just think it works so well when it does. And I'm always going to be celebrating that. So anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I'm sure I rambled on and didn't talk too much about things you maybe wanted to hear, but I just wanted to showcase a cool oil-painted comic book or graphic novel and written by one of the greats. So thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time. Peace.